Assalamualaikum and a very good day to Dr. Marina and all my fellow viewers.
So now we're going to look at the alternation of generations life cycle, a two-generation life cycle of plants.
So this is now what plants do. Plants are kind of foreign to us because they have a whole extra step. We're going to start with a diploid adult, which is be equivalent to an animal. We're going to call it a sporophyte, which is diploid, a 2N generation. That sporophyte is going to undergo that magic cell division called meiosis. But what plants make is not eggs and sperms. The product of meiosis in plants is a spore. These spores are haploid reproductive cell, and they undergo mitosis that develops into a haploid new organism called gametophyte without the need to fuse with another reproductive cell. This gametophyte will undergo mitosis, produce gametes. A female gametogame is called an archegonium, while a male gametogame is called an enteridium, which will fertilize and restore the diploid condition, which forms a diploid zygote. That diploid zygote, the fertilized egg, undergoes mitosis and grows into a sporophyte embryo 2N generation, or we call that as an embryophyta, an alternate name for the lamp planklate since the 2N embryo are retained.
So this is what you've got to remember with alternation of generations life cycle. Sporophytes produce spores. Gametophytes produce gametes. Keep also in mind that the product of meiosis in plants and animals are different. In animals, meiosis produces gametes, eggs, and sperms. But in plants, the product of meiosis is haploid spores. Also, mitosis occurs as a spore becomes a gametophyte, as a gametophyte produces gametes, as well as when a zygote becomes a sporophyte. Next, we're going to talk about a few main groups of plants that will illustrate the difference in the alternation of generation story, which is really what this video of course is about. We're going to start with the mosses. Mosses are in a group called bryophytes. When you look at a moss, mosses grow in very moist places in the forest. They need a lot of water because mosses are non-vascular plants.
When you look at a moss, what you're looking at is actually the haploid gametophyte body. So let's look at the moss life cycle. Gametophytes produce, of course, gametes, eggs and sperms. So there are male and female moss plants, and these are all haploid. At fertilization, the egg and sperm of course fuse together and form a diploid zygote. So now we're looking at something that's diploid. The thing is, on a moss, the diploid stage is very small and we call it a sporophyte. And it actually grows right on top of the haploid gametophyte. And most people have never seen it. Now, as always, the sporophyte produces spores, right? And those spores are haploid because it's the sporophyte that undergoes meiosis. So here you go back into the spore stage. These are now haploid, and they will grow up into the haploid gametophyte, which is where our story began. So the dominant phase in a moss is the gametophyte.
Now let's compare the story of mosses to a more highly evolved plant, the fern. And when you look at a fern, it is the sporophyte stage. Ferns are vascular plants, so they can get much larger than mosses.
Now we're going to start with the dominant phase, the phase that you will see out in the forest. And in the case of fern, it's the sporophyte. The sporophyte produces spores. If you're going to look underside of the fern leaf, you'll to see the clusters of sporangia. And of course, sporophytes undergo meiosis to produce haploid spores. And haploid spores grow into a gametophyte. This gametophyte is very small, it's microscopic. Fern gametophyte got archegonia, the female parts, and the enteridia, which are the male parts. They only find each other in water, which is why ferns are also very much linked to moist environments. So the gametophytes got the sperm and egg, which fertilize to form a diploid zygote. Now we have the new sporophyte. It actually grows on top of the gametophyte. And as the ferns get larger, we start the cycle all over again.
So now we've got two more groups to go. Now we're going to talk about the gymnosperms, the cone-bearing plants. When you look at the cone-bearing plants, those are all sporophytes. Gametophyte has gotten smaller still. The gametes are actually hidden inside the cone.
So we're going to start again with the phase that you see in nature, the sporophyte. And the tree in the cones, we have, of course, meiosis. And the product of meiosis, of course, are haploid spores. This actually is going to take place within the cone. And at fertilization, there are male and female cones. Male cones, which produce pollen, they basically just wither away after they release their pollen, and we don't really see them. During fertilization, the diploid state is restored. Now we have our zygote, and it develops within a seed. And that seed will sprout and grow an entirely new sporophyte.
So now, the most advanced of all plants are the angiosperms. The flowering plants, which in nature, the sporophyte dominates the angiosperms, and the gametes are actually hidden inside the flowers.
So again, the diploid state is what we're going to start with. The plant itself is the sporophyte. Within the flower, meiosis occurs to form the gamete. In this case, the pollen grains. The pollen grain will stick on the stigma and grow a tube all the way down to the egg. Fertilization occurs, diploid condition is restored, and now you have the development of embryo within a seed. The ripened ovary becomes a fruit. Seed then germinates, and embryo grows into plant again.
So the summary of this topic is that plants differ in which generation gametophyte or sporophyte is dominant. In non-vascular plants, the gametophyte is dominant, while in vascular plants, the sporophyte is dominant. The shift to sporophyte dominance is an adaptation to life on land. As the sporophyte gains dominance, the gametophyte becomes microscopic and dependent on the sporophyte. And that is all about my topic.